The phone used to be the tool of choice for a lot of people, a lot of professionals to connect with one another, particularly salespeople. Phones and phone calls were just a regular thing. There were all these call centers where people just quote unquote dialed for dollars. And that still does go on some today. I don't know about your cell phone, but mine is regularly ringing with spam calls of someone trying to sell me one thing or another. Of lately, it's actually been a lot of calls about health insurance and those types of things. And that's even with a spam blocker on my phone. These are still coming through. Now, usually those are automated calls, but occasionally it's a person calling, trying to connect with me and sell me something. So the phone for a long, long time was the tool of choice for professionals that were trying to sell something. And nowadays, people have moved a lot toward electronic communication. Even in the professional world, we know we're all using email to exchange messages. We're all some of us are even using text messages between professionals. Just recently, we made an offer on a rental property, and a lot of the communication with the realtor happened across text. So electronic communication has really started to take over more and more. There's all kinds of offerings. You know, people can even connect via Facebook Messenger. Maybe you use Slack as a communication tool with either people inside your company or maybe even clients. Electronic communication has become more and more regular. But I still feel like the phone or using the phone is an untapped resource and tool for a lot of professionals, and particularly startups that are looking to connect with investors. Now, do investors like phone calls? Well, you know, sometimes we've heard this myth that you have to have a mutual connection in order to reach out to an investor. Now, that might be some investors who are interested in that type of setup to where they want to have someone introduce the two parties to one another. Maybe you're a startup and I know an investor. I know what you're looking for and I know what they're looking for, and I'm able to connect the two of you. That certainly can't help when you have a third party making that introduction. But the idea that investors require it all the time is just not necessarily true. As a matter of fact, a lot of investors are always looking for lots of deals or deal flow. And so if they're requiring this third party interjection, then they're limiting the deals that they're going to look at. So I wouldn't hesitate to reach out to an investor if you somehow have their phone number, whether it be their office or even personal, to reach out to them. You know, a lot of the times with this, you're emailing a pitch deck to an investor. And what happens with these electronic communication methods is there's a lot lost in translation. So, for example, emailing a pitch deck, when you do a pitch, there's always a voiceover component, especially if you've built your pitch deck the way you should, where it's a lot of imagery and very little text. It's important that you add that voiceover to add the key points that are missing on each slide. And so what I'll do with the startups I work with is recommend that they video themselves through something like this that I'm using, Zoom, to include that video of them doing the pitch presentation so that the potential investor, can hear their voiceover. So you can kind of get around some of these challenges that come with electronic communication, but I still think it's a really good idea to go ahead and reach out and call investors when you have their contact information. And again, that's because I feel like there's a lot lost in translation. So just think about it. If you're sending an email or a text to someone, whether it's an investor or not, they can't catch the tone of what you're saying. I don't know about you, if you've ever had an email exchange with someone, maybe something you said comes off via email as being very harsh, and they think the tone of it is being harsh, when in reality, you weren't doing that. You can't express vocally your tone and the things that you're trying to say via electronic communication. And that's true for passion too. If you're just emailing something, even an introduction to an investor, they can't tell how passionate you are about what you're doing. So I think using the phone really helps in that aspect. And that's true even if you're leaving a voicemail and you're not connecting directly with the investor. The other thing I think voice or using the phone does for startups when they're calling investors is it helps build rapport. Again, even if it's via voicemail, at least then they can hear your tone. They can get a sense of you as a person. Maybe even you can laugh a little bit and sort of build that rapport with an investor, especially if you are able to talk to them one-on-one. So passion and rapport really come along when you're making these phone calls. The other thing I think a phone call does is it shows you got a lot of hustle. Now, I'm not suggesting that you call an investor, every 5 minutes and drive them crazy. Matter of fact, I'm suggesting you don't do that. But by calling investors, I feel like you're showing that you're willing to hustle and you're willing to stand out from all the others who are literally just taking what I consider to be the easy path and emailing them. Email is allows you to avoid rejection. If they delete your email and never look at it, well, you don't really feel bad because they didn't tell you no. And so that's why I think a lot of folks go that route, just because it's easy. And easy is not what you want to do with investors. I think making that phone call shows that you have hustle and that you're willing to do something above and beyond what your typical startup founder might do. Now, before I let you go, I've got a couple of rules for when I use email versus when I don't. And it's true for just business and even personal matters, but it's also true when you're trying to work with investors. For example, email might work really well when you're sending something to them and the response time can vary a little bit, right? So if you're needing a more immediate response to something, a phone call is more appropriate to make to someone else. If you need a more immediate response from an investor, then calling them might get you a more immediate response. The other time that I like to do something verbally, again, whether it's with startup investors or not, is when an email is going to go back and forth too many times. I don't know if you've been in that nasty loop before, to where you'll exchange, 15 or 20 different replies on an email. I figure once you've done that about twice, it's a good time to stop and pick up the phone and call someone so you can hash things out. So there's a lot of reasons that I use the phone in my both my personal and professional life, and I think these apply very well to an investor. I would again encourage you not to hesitate. That if you have their contact information, to go ahead and reach out. If they've put it on their website, that's public information. They're obviously not hiding it, again, because they want to see deal flow. So don't hesitate to pick up the phone and call people. Don't always use the easy route or electronic methods, because they're not always best for you. Until next time, hope you find your voice and find funding. See you later.